And yes, Yanina will also be taking photographs. So have your photograph faces ready, everyone.
Is water drinkable?
This is drinkable water from the drinkable water cooler. As this building is, yes, you don't quite know what water you can drink and what you can't. Anyway, thanks so much for coming. It's great to see you all here. This is a new event. I mean, it's a new festival. But this is our kind of Meet the Puppeteer series. So this is happening all week. We're going to have lots of different speakers. That basically, it's a Q&A. It's very informal. I'll ask some questions. Hopefully you'll also ask some questions. Otherwise it's just going to be you eavesdropping in on a chat. But that might be pleasant enough. And also there's a puppetry research conference happening on Saturday, if you're not aware of that, which is of a similar sort of feel, a kind of chatty, but that's researchers presenting on their research to do with puppetry. But grab me afterwards if you're interested in that. It's also in the programme that is on your seats, and we have lots of them left, so please take some and give them to your friends. But please welcome, for the very first event, Gavin Glover. Woo! Big clap. There's a sea of people here. It is packed to the rafters. It's a good crowd, I think. Gavin, thanks for agreeing to this.
That's right.
Thanks for doing the because you're obviously here for the workshop.
I am, yes.
It's a 2-day masterclass called Acting the Puppet. And I thought it would be nice to, which I have experienced today. We've been through kind of the first day of that. I just wondered if you could talk about what you're hoping to achieve kind of in that masterclass as a sort of just way of kicking us off.
Kicking you off. Well, I think a lot of people who have come are not necessarily puppeteers. There are a few puppeteers. But what I want to try to do is use some puppets and put it into a theatrical situation. So we're not just doing puppets, we're kind of trying to fit it into acting as well, or some sort of other performance. So the puppet is kind of shared by the people. So because everyone has a different background in terms of performance, you might want to take some of those tools away for when you do your own work. So it's kind of like an introduction to manipulation, but it's also a kind of a gateway into maybe how you might want to use it in your own work.
What sort of audience do we have here? Are people performers, or do you just have interests in puppetry? Why are you here? Sort of, just so we can kind of gauge where you're at. Obviously we can go puppetry nerd. I'm very capable of doing that, but it would be nice to kind of know, are you guys performers interested?
I'm a theatre maker. I'm reviewing the festival, so I have very little puppetry experience.
Okay, but we have, do we have performers here?
Of puppeteers and makers.
Making,
From the making workshop.
Excellent, yeah.
Performers rather than puppeteers. Zilch. Oh, what? Right, so it's a mixture. So rather than make it specifically a puppetry workshop, I mean, which it kind of is, because I've brought a bag of puppets with me.
Well, so something I'm interested in, which we were talking about before, is this relationship between performers and makers. And you were saying that, you know, you're a maker predominantly, and perhaps not so much a performer. But what interests me is I think of you as a performer, but you also make your own puppets. Yeah. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the two.
Well, I'm quite lucky because I can do the both, but I think it's really important if you're a maker that you know how a puppet can be manipulated or operated. So I think it's definitely worthwhile attending or even watching a workshop and getting your hands dirty, as it were. Because it's all very well making a puppet, but if you don't know how it's supposed to move, then it's not going to be much use to a puppeteer when they get it. Same thing as if you're a puppeteer. Okay, it's difficult to know how to make a puppet, but you kind of need to know roughly what goes on internally and inside, and what what you can put it through.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes if you make a puppet that's too delicate and too nice and brittle and delicate and stuff, it's just going to fall to pieces, and it's not really much use. And also, I think there's a lot of detail that you put in which isn't really necessary in a puppet when you make. Because if you're sitting 10 metres away as an audience, you can't see that perfect little sewing line or that little tiny bit of stitch or whatever it is. And it can get a bit too precious. And I think certainly today we've been throwing the puppets about, and they have to be fairly robust. And I think that's important to, kick them around as well as do delicate stuff with them. But do you know what I mean?
Really interesting, yeah, because you were saying...
That's my personal opinion, because I put my puppets through,
slaughter
through it.
You chuck them around.
Well, yeah, and I think once if you know that they can be chucked around, that's great as for a performer, because then you can wrestle on the floor with it, you can hang it off the ceiling and kick it literally and do whatever you want with it, and that kind of allows you the freedom not to kind of treat this thing so oh, it's a puppet, better be careful with it, because it might break, sort of thing.
Do you have some delicate puppets though?
No, not.
You don't at all.
Not really, no. I think so.
Because see, that's the other side of puppetry, is that it's a real collector's thing as well, and you can get some very expensive puppets and very lovely puppets. But they often aren't.
They might not be performance puppets.
They often aren't used for performance. But I think it is a shame, because there are some beautiful puppets that I think would really do well from performing. But they're just so expensive that nobody wants to let them out of the cabinet. Or
I suppose it depends on what sort of performer you are and what you want to. Because I'm much more into sort of the physical theatre side of stuff. So it's puppets are bound to get trodden on and kicked about and stuff, kind of pulled. Their arms come off. So it depends. It's like all puppetry, it's an artistic choice.
So what makes for you, like for a performer, sometimes if you pick up a puppet, there's something about it that gives it character, or you're kind of drawn to it. And I've always struggled to kind of grasp what that is. Sometimes it can just be a head and a piece of cloth, but sometimes they just work together really nicely. I wondered if you had any thoughts on like what makes like a really great puppet.
It's a hard one. Kind of less is more, like all of the work. Less is more, less detail, and there's more for the imagination facially, and if it's moved well enough or realistically enough or with enough commitment from the puppeteer, then you really, and the puppeteer invests all of that emotion and whatever it is, the drama into the puppet through their movement, then the audience in theory will pick up on that. So it's a hard one. I think it's if the expression is too fixed, it's like a fixed smile, then it can't do anything else. Again, if it's too sad, it's kind of going to play a sad character. It's quite hard to. So I try to make them slightly neutral, but with a little, irking to one way or the other, depending on the character.
Hearing you talk earlier, it just made me think of like a puppet having some sort of spark, or having some sort of story behind it, that you look at it and you think, oh, there's something more to you, there's something, and I wonder if that's something. I don't know, the sense of curiosity, the sense of there being something more.
There has to be some sort of intrigue, I think. My experience is working with puppets with very little text, so there's an intrigue there already, because they're not telling you how they feel, they're just existing in this space. But I don't know, does that answer your question?
Well, yes,
kind of,
roughly. If yes.
I mean, each puppeteer has their own style of work. I mean, I've got my particular style. There's some pictures of them actually. We can have a look in a minute.
Yes.
But a different company or different artist would choose a different material. I use leather quite a lot in my stuff, because I quite like that kind of old, kind of kicked around boot type of feel. That kind of worn leather feel. Other people like to use latex or papier-mâché or anything, or carved wood or something. I'm not very good at carving, so I kind of go the other way and use clay, make the sculpt out of clay. Other people don't like clay; they prefer the hands-on carving approach. So each to their own, really.
I guess it's if you're an artist and you work with the materials that you're comfortable with, and you work with what you've got. And I think there's some stunning puppets that that there is very little to them kind of technically. But if somebody can make it feel alive, or it's got some sort of character behind it.
Yeah, I guess that's the next step, isn't it? But if the puppet looks good already, just sitting there, it's already alive, and then the puppeteer just has to come along and make it even better, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Any questions at this point? We can open it up to the floor a little bit, or we can just...
What got you in... Oh, sorry. Go on.
No. Sorry, well, actually, that was going to be partly my question. Was kind of what's your background with capital B, as they say. But also, kind of with event. Also, I keep overhearing conversations about actors and puppeteers being very different people, and there's definitely a difference, which I find really interesting because I kind of count myself as a performer who kind of floats between both. I don't know whether that means I'm dulling one down because I'm doing both, I don't know. But yeah, I just wondered what you thought of that as a kind of definite separation.
Well, I guess it's the same separation you could say like an actor and a dance. If an actor can dance, then you find actors who can't dance, or an actor who can sing or not sing, or an actor that can play the fiddle or not play the fiddle, an actor who can play with a puppet or not play with a puppet. There has to be some sort of skill, I suppose, but some people can't do it, or they don't want to do it, so they've never learnt, or so not all actors can be puppeteers, not puppeteers can be actors, blah blah blah. So I've worked with actors who can't manipulate, and it's really hard, but there's something in there not being able to do it, which is interesting as well, because you're watching, then you become interested in them performing badly with a puppet. You know what I mean? 'Cause you can usually see the actor in the room as well. If they're covered in and they're all blacked out and stuff, then you're just looking at someone's bad puppetry. Do you know what I mean? So there is two ways of looking at it, and if that's what you want, an actor being rubbish, then that's equally as interesting as an actor doing it perfectly.
I think the relationship between acting and puppetry is really interesting because they are, in my head, quite different. Because if you are on stage and putting something forward, you're saying this is me. Whereas if you're a puppeteer, you're saying this isn't me. This is all them.
It is really.
Well, but is it because it's kind of channeling sort of energy through this thing. So it's not about you anymore.
Shamanistically. Is that what you mean?
But it's not. I'm not saying actors have ego, but it's some of them do, obviously.
No,
some
really?
puppeteers must have ego, But for me, it's quite a different discipline in that sense. Although the two, like you say, particularly in visual theatre, do sort of merge more and more now.
Innit? Yeah, sorry, I don't know what the question is. What was the question?
Well, just a discussion point. But yeah.
And I've worked with a lot of actors, because I was working with Faulty Optic, and we were puppeteers essentially. So we were kind of in the darkness, kind of blacked out with stockings or hoods over our heads and stuff. Don't look at me, look at the puppet. And then Faulty Optic finished about 6-7 years ago, and I did a lot of freelance work with other companies, and some of which were acting companies, like the National Theatre of Scotland, and they were very much well-paid actors doing stuff, and some of them were quite well established and stuff. And I was there to help them do manipulate some puppets at some point during the show, and it was really fascinating to see how they obviously could deliver lines. It was a very different show to what I was used to, but I was still having to teach them how to breathe the puppet, move the puppet, and then work in the text, breathe at certain points and move like that. And they obviously can offer, because of their training as an actor, you know what it's like. You have a slightly different set of skills than if you're a puppeteer just a puppeteer who is used to, you know, the more ethereal stuff, or the, you know, listening to music and dancing with puppets and stuff. You know, they offer a slightly different level of performance, different.
What about that magic then? So I think a lot of puppeteers do kind of privilege that magic and making a kind of performance, like, you know, you completely surrender your mind to this piece of art, or whereas I do like this kind of acknowledgement of the puppeteer, and that this isn't you know, this isn't just us sacrificing our minds and we forget everything. You know, we're still aware that these are, you know, manipulated beings, and that for me is what makes them interesting. Yeah, I wondered if you had any thoughts on. Do you think of your stuff as kind of magic in any sense?
Magic. What, real magic?
Magic in the
magic does exist.
I don't know you, but the.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, puppeteers, shows that have been made by puppeteers are slightly different to shows that have been made by actors with puppets, I suppose, because they approach it from a different way. And it is more of an artistic statement, you know. An actor would choose a different subject matter, probably completely, to a puppeteer who's, you know, very precious. You know, they've spent months and months making something, and then they want to present it. And if you give that to an actor, they probably just drop it and break it or something. Do you know what I mean? I think there's sometimes that puppeteers can be a bit too over precious with their work. You can see it when you watch some of the shows. They just get a bit long, and they need to be directed better. Or do you know what I mean? There's something. So I'm halfway between the two, really.
But then on the other hand,
I'm always quite cynical about stuff. I sort of, if it's rubbish, I'll say that's rubbish. You know, for my own work. But that's shit. That I'm just going to do something else. Do you know what I mean? Yes.
So that constant criticism thing, that's a sort of working discipline for you.
Yeah,
that's something that keeps your
bullshit meter
work alive.
Got to keep it tuned.
Is that difficult?
No, it's really easy.
But is it difficult in a workshop where you have to be really positive and you know?
Well, no. When it's other people's work, I turn all that off. You know, because I'm very aware that puppetry and the puppet art is an art form. Do you know what I mean? If I go to an exhibition of a painter and I say, well, I don't like that, it's rubbish, that oil paint's crap. You know, it's not for me to say it's rubbish, that's the way.
You must see puppetry you don't like, though.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. But, you know, that's the I've seen plays, you know, we've all seen stuff that we don't like, but, you know, it doesn't mean it's bad, it just means that it's not to your taste.
To speak to you.
Okay. And also, if you're a puppeteer, you're often quite perfectionist about your work, so you've got high levels of stuff, you know, expectations, because that's what you know, when you look at the mirror and at your work, you go, no, that movement's not quite right. So I'm just the worst audience member. You know, I'll sit there, oh, for fuck's sake. And everyone's like, oh, that was beautiful.
The curses of knowing too much.
Well, yeah, totally. But, you know, certainly in a workshop situation, I'm not going to sit there and go, sorry, mate, that's rubbish.
Slag it off.
What are you doing? What are you thinking? Because it's not my place to do that.
What about your own work, though, is the thing that makes you go, or it's crap, or I hated that? Is it just the odd movement, or just with a motivation, or?
I don't know. How do I criticise my own work?
What makes you? Yeah. I guess what makes you criticise it, or what if you watch something back and you think that wasn't right at all? You know. How do you kind of?
Well, try and have someone else in to help. You know, if you're in it, it's really hard to see what you're doing because you're behind the puppet, obviously, quite a lot of the time. So you need a mirror, or at least, and someone else out the front there watching you to say, no, it's fine, don't worry. Let's just, do you know what I mean? To kind of encourage you, because sometimes my bullshit meter's like really unsensitive, and I'm going, oh, this is shit. But actually, someone will say, no, that's fine. Just give it a bit more time. And it always changes during the show as well, because you'll rehearse a show forever, and then it changes on the first night because you get a reaction from the audience about you get a laugh here and a sigh there and whatever, and you go, oh, actually that bit's worth tweaking. Well, we've all done it, haven't we, as performers? You listen to the audience, which you can't get in rehearsal.
Yeah. I mean, in certain disciplines that's sort of obvious, so like stand-up comedy, say, sets can change, dramatically. Yeah. I guess in my head, a piece of puppetry, it's like you make it and it's in your and it emerges as this perfect thing. But it's interesting you say that, it goes out in front of an audience and it will change and it will evolve. And
it's bound to, because it has to be live. I think it's really important that it is live. And obviously you stick with the script or whatever it is, your visual script, but you can tweak it and make it better and hone it as you would anything, really. And that's the beauty of live performances. You can change it every night.
So does a show ever get to a point where it's finished, or is it always in that state of flux and emergence, and it might change the next night because you...
I think it can change. It can get to a finished point, but then it's quite easy to get a bit blasé with it. I've done shows where you've done like a week in the same venue, and the first night has gone pretty well. The second night is really good, and the third night, wow, this is really easy. And you'll do the same kind of gag that you did the night before, and it just falls flat on its face because you're not actually listening to the audience. And then the fourth night, you've gone, oh, actually, I better buck up my ideas, and you're back on form again. Do you know what I mean? It's just there's a bit of a lull because so you need to have an ear. On anything, like even if it's a little titter here and stuff. It's not like you're playing for laughs, but some audience are a bit more serious, some are more, more light-hearted, more drunk or whatever. So I think it's really important.
5 minutes. Oh my God, it's gone really quick. Do you want to get those pictures out? And if anyone has any other questions at this point, it would be a good time to shout.
What got you into puppetry?
That was your question before, wasn't it?
The spark.
Well, funnily enough, I thought that puppets was just for kids and wasn't really worth. I wasn't really interested in puppets, and I got a job at the Little Angel Theatre in London, which is a family-run theatre, still going. You might know it, some of you. And it is for kids. They were doing shows for kids and stuff, but the amount of time and effort in the lighting and the quality of the work and stuff, and even some of the puppets themselves, they've had these big 6-foot-high puppets with taxidermy eyes. They just look fantastic, and I thought, this is brilliant. But I was also really intrigued by Meyer and the Quay brothers, who are animators from Czech and London. And they were just doing very surreal, strange, very rich work, with no words. And they were just fascinating. The 3D animation stuff. So that was what got me into it. And also I realised when I was there that I could make stuff as well.
What was your background before that? Have you done sculpture or any kind of...
well, actually I did architecture. I did 3 years of architecture. Just very frustrated architect.
Well, doing the models at least.
No, I couldn't do that.
You didn't get to make the models.
Yeah, just loads of drawing. Backache. It's horrible.
It was interesting you were saying about puppetry for kids and that was your perception.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people's perception is. Until you look at it and go, actually, if you... Well, at that time there wasn't that many shows, to be honest, that were doing kind of dark, gruesome, strange things.
But still now, if we're out on Northumberland Street, like we were promoting the festival, and we've got all sorts of puppets, the audience that it attracts is children, which is great, and we don't want to discourage that, but the festival is predominantly adult,
it's more for adult
programming, and it's just but I think the Little Angel is really interesting because they have that kind of balance of really contemporary
I think since then there's a lot of stuff in the mainstream which has made puppets more accessible and more acceptable for adults rather than for kids. Like Warhorse and Improbable and various other companies doing stuff. But of course, it's still for a theatre-going audience. It's not for you know, someone walking up the street who might not be aware of any type of theatre. You know what I mean? But there is some good street theatre puppetry as well.
Yes.
That's more for adults, a bit more gruesome.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And I suppose most people on the street have never been to the theatre. Their only experience of puppetry would be sort of TV stuff, and if they're into sort of darker TV stuff or film stuff, Tim Burton type of, that's kind of the mainstream, which is a bit darker, still kind of for families and stuff.
On the point of that dark thing, as I was reading your sort of bios with the references to dark humour, I just think, like, I don't know a lot about poetry, but reading into it, it seems like a definite theme. Any thoughts on why that
on
is?
dark? But I just prefer that, and puppets can be that. You can kind of chop them about and cut the heads off, because they're kind of like all puppets really are. They're not obviously real, they're puppets, so they symbolise something, and because they're moving like people or animals, they're actually a metaphor of humanity or the human state or something. So you're already in that kind of strange world of parallel worlds and stuff. Do you know what I mean? So you need to finish
chopping
now.
them up can be a metaphor for chopping them apart.
Well, I mean, that's a literal metaphor, but it also, if you take it further and say, if I cut a puppet's legs off, it means that doesn't mean I'm actually severing someone's legs. It might mean metaphorically that they can't go out, they can't move, or you're actually restricting someone, or there's a sort of, if someone does it to someone else, it's a physical way of controlling someone, because you stop them going out. Do you know what I mean?
I guess the puppet could,
and then the puppet can regrow its legs. It's like, I found my legs in. It's all in our expressions. I found my feet. It's like, you can actually put some more feet on the puppet and walk out.
They've got this other whole extra stuff that can happen that can't normally happen.
Exactly, yeah. And I quite enjoyed that metaphor world of, doing something. It's like, what? Let's take his head off and put another one on.
Yeah, we'll have another head here.
It's like changing my hat, changing my head. I've got my working head on or hat on or something. It's all in our expressions. It's all there as a metaphors in our language.
What a great way to end talking about swapping heads over. Let's give Gavin a big round of applause. These talks are happening.
No questions from the audience.
Well, you can grab Gavin's around. We're going to Cobalt afterwards, which is why we have to wrap this up.
Yeah.
There's more talks. So Blind Summit, we've got a talk from Blind Summit on Wednesday, 6 p.m. And then Stephen Mottram is on Friday at 6 p.m. if you're interested in more of these talks. Yes, they're here and they're free. This is a free event that we're putting on, but the festival does cost money to put on, so if you do have any change and would like to donate, there will be a bucket on the way out. But it's
bucket.
Pay as you feel, and there's no pressure either way. So thanks very much, and one
Cheers,
last
guys.
appreciation for
Thanks
Gavin.
for the festival.
Thank you. Yeah, shake hands.
Indeed, yes.
Professional.
Cheers, man.
Thanks.
Turn this nonsense off. Great.